Hey World Changers, it's Pastor Wes, and welcome back to day 2. Now this week we're talking about healthy expectations. This week has a very personal side to me. Is the reason I'm passionate about talking to this. Man, I can be a very driven personality. I can be a very much heavy organizing and planning personality is what I can be. So I like to plan things way out and start placing things day by day by day and set all my expectations up. And sometimes life just comes through and kind of knocks it all down. And sometimes actually God comes through and be like, you're going to have to change all that. The reason I'm talking about that as we go through healthy expectations, I want to share with you some personal things I've learned about setting healthy expectations, which is getting them from God ultimately and being flexible and allowing them to change. Let me give you an example of that from James it talks about here. That's chapter 4, and I'm going to read verse 13 through 16 for you. It says, "Look here, you who say, today or tomorrow, we're going to a certain town and we will stay there a year. We will do business there and make a profit." These sound like great plans, by the way. Verse 14 says, "How do you know what your life will be like tomorrow?" This is a question that's imposed to that statement right there. Your life is like the morning fog. It's here a little while, then it's gone. It's always changing is the point. Verse 15 says, "What you ought to say is, if the Lord wants us to," which means you're giving your plans and everything over to God is what you're doing. We talked about that yesterday in Psalms 37. So picking that back up, what you ought to say is, if the Lord wants us to, we will live and do this or that. Verse 16 says, "Otherwise you are boasting about your own pretentious plans, and all such boasting is evil," or considered unbelief. You're not relying on God is actually what it means. Man, I have fallen victim to doing this very same thing here where I was like, I know what I'm going to do in a year. I can see what I want to do. I have these plans for my life. I have these plans for my job. And then as you can see, even right now with the COVID-19 that we've been going through, everybody's plans for the year 2020 was completely turned upside down, rearranged, completely knocked down. And it can seem like disarray and turmoil, especially if you can have, like my habit was, man, I planned everything out and now it's just all gone all of a sudden. You know, that's not always a bad thing. And that is in no way implying that God did this, but it's sometimes to take a bad thing and God in his goodness flips it and takes a bad situation and turns it to all of our good. God's great at that. And in this moment, you know what I'm seeing more than ever and learning in my own life is how God is taking a messed up situation, knocking all the plans down, and starting with a fresh slate to say, you know what, did I really get that from God? Did I really think this was going to work out? Did I really plan this right and bring it before him and say, you know what, God, here's what I'm going to do. Here's what you want me to do, actually, is what it was. And it's teaching me a new sense of flexibility. It's teaching me a new sense to not be so high-strung and taut and just gripping everything about as tight as you can possibly grip it and allow God to flow. Is the problem I've realized as you structure things so tight, you build things so rigid, it gives very little room and wiggle room for the Spirit of God to come in and do something greater, to do something bigger. See, all I'm expecting now and seeing now is that all our plans, good as they may have been, got knocked down. But you know what? That means it's allowed room for God to do bigger and better than we ever planned. But what it does here and what I've learned, you have to come here is not boasting, oh, I came up with this great plan. I came up with this great idea and I know it's going to work. And then it gets knocked down is what happens. And it brings you to a place of not God trying to break you, but it brings you to an end of yourself. It brings you to an end of your ability and realize, man, it was supposed to be you all along, God. I was supposed to bring this before you. And my ability to plan is limited as a human being. And I think we all, including myself, got a reality check that, man, you can plan all day, but then something happens and life comes through and you got to be able to shift. That's a part of what faith really is. Faith is not being able to see everything perfectly planned out and know exactly how it's all going to play. Faith is when you don't know, but all you know is God's going to come through, and how he does it may at first seem like, I don't know what God's doing in this moment. I don't know where he's navigating, but you know what? I can trust him. I can be flexible. I can adjust my plans. I can stop being so rigid and realize, man, what I had planned a year, it's okay to plan it, but I know it's subject to change. And that's what I've realized in my life. I was like, things are subject to change at God's will in any moment. And I'm going to be okay with that. I'm going to trust in that because it's easy to be afraid in these moments when all of a sudden everything you know becomes the unknown. And right now we are in such a heavy unknown place. And that's actually a good thing if you allow yourself to flip it, allow God to reset your expectations. And the base of all my expectations, I'm realizing, is I expect God to be good to me. I expect God to lead me through every situation. I expect God to show me greater things than I could ever expect and far exceed my own expectations, my own plans. So what I encourage you to do, now that you got the slate clean on your table, break out the calendar, break out the pad, sit down with your family and loved ones, and create community in your home and say, you know what? We're all going to sit here for God and say, God, I know what we had planned. I know the old things were there, but we're going to let all that go. We're not going to be disappointed about it anymore. And we're going to take a fresh look with you, God, and say, God, lead us now. God, plan for us now. And we're going to build a new expectations what we're going to do. And we're going to be excited and joyful about that and knowing, man, this is going to be awesome. I love you guys. I encourage you to join me tomorrow as we take on another step of just breaking each one of these tools down. And I'll see you then.